Let's get some analysis now on the tensions between these two biggest opposition parties. And to do that, we are joined by political analyst Dr. Levy Ndou, who is with the Tshwane University of Technology. He talks to us from the Northwest this evening. Dr. Ndou, good evening to you and thank you for your time. How interested are South Africans in this? Yes, the MK party says we're not going to get into a tit for tat, but it is happening. How interested are South Africans in this public spat?
Good evening, Toli. Good evening to the viewers at home. South Africans are going to be very much interested in the public spat between the MKP and the EFF. And the reason being that most of the people never thought that the MK party would be interested in poaching members and prominent members from the EFF into their own ranks. Most people never thought that there is going to be huge tension between the MKP and the EFF, because the assumption has always been that maybe these two could easily collaborate, work together in order to ensure that they collapse the ANC, because in any way, they both come from the ANC as aggrieved individuals. And here I'm talking about their leaders.
Yeah.
But the unfortunate part, Stoli, is that when you want your political party to grow, what you do is that you go out and poach from other political parties. And you don't just only poach ordinary members. Firstly, you poach those that are prominent, and you also poach those that are potential voters. And that is what the MKP has done to the EFF. Most people thought that the main focus would be for the MKP to the ANC. They've done much with the ANC. And what the MKP appears to be doing is to stretch their arms and go into the EFF, and it has actually happened. So those could be the reasons why you have this kind of public spat between the two political parties.
Well, you talk about the poaching of members. Here's a question I have yet to ask a person like yourself. Why do you think Floyd Shibambu was the first prominent leader of the EFF to jump ship and go to the MK party?
It could have been because of him not being happy in the EFF, or him being recruited by the MK party and agreed. But you need to recall that it appears as if there were a number of meetings that took place before Shibambu could go and join the MKP. And I think what the MKP wanted to do was to get a big gun in the form of Shibambu to leave the EFF, because they could have assumed that he has got a very big following from the EFF. Also, by doing so, they wanted to test how the EFF is going to respond to the departure of Shibambu, whether they are going to be unsettled, or whether there's going to be some form of anxiety on the part of the EFF, which happened. And it actually bore fruits on the part of the MKP. And what appears to have been the program has been to recruit these members, taking them one by one, and indeed ensuring that these people are actually being paraded in the public space, so that the MKP should demonstrate that indeed they are on a project to get as many members as possible from the EFF.
I'm going to move on from Floyd Shibambu in a moment, and briefly if you can, because there's other issues that I'd like us to discuss. So let's assume that Floyd Shibambu saw greener pastures in the MK party. How much growth do you believe is there for him from the position he currently occupies? And I'm assuming that in the EFF, perhaps he may have reached a ceiling, because at no point do I remember Julius Malema being contested for the position of president.
I think only we need to look at the role of the deputy in many organizations, and constitutionally. The person who is given the responsibility of being the deputy would always be given very minimal responsibilities, and that person would only exercise his or responsibility in the absence of the office bearer. And indeed, Shibambu has been the deputy at the EFF, and even though he appears to have done a lot of work behind closed doors, he is one person who, in the view of many, could have done more for the EFF. Now that he's the Secretary General of the MKP, he is the one who is driving the party at a very authoritative level. And he is the best candidate because he is coming from both the ANC and the EFF. He knows the activities in those two political parties and is easily able to position well the MKP. His knowledge and background of politics, both South African and international politics, puts Shibambu in a much better position to be one of the leaders that cannot be ignored in South African politics.
Here's Julius Malema, in a way, declaring that his party is now a sworn enemy of the MK party. I just want him to express it in his own words, and we'll pick up after that.
Why would Malema declare MK as an enemy? Anyone who wants to kill the EFF is an enemy. I don't care whether you are black or white. As long as your agenda is to kill the EFF, you are the enemy. They say, oh, Malema says we must support Chidima, but we must not support Zuma. Chidima never wanted to kill EFF. Zuma wants to kill the EFF. That's why we must not support him. That is the difference. Anyone who recruits from amongst us, anyone who wants to kill this organization is the enemy of the people.
Dr. Ndou, I'm closing this conversation now. So 2 questions in one. Julius Malema goes to Nkandla to make amends, one would think, and has tea with the former president. This is after he was made to pay back the money, and the 9 years that he was president, I suspect much pain would have been inflicted by the EFF. So Julius goes and makes amends. Today, he tells us that Zuma is the enemy of the EFF. How much credibility does Julius Malema still have within political circles, within the South African populace? How do people view him? And then the MK party. How much growth do you see the MK party garnering after these very public problems that they have faced? Those 2 questions.
There are other parties that have declared, and specifically the EFF, as public enemy number 1. So it is nothing new in South African politics. But I think it's important to note that Mr. Malema is speaking from an aggrieved point of view, in the sense that he could have not thought that the MKP would be the party that would mostly poach very prominent members from the economic freedom fighters. People that have been poached from the EFF are some of those who were very close to former President Jacob Zuma. They spent a lot of time with him. And my view is that the EFF should have been suspicious of some of these members who are within their ranks, but they are very, very close with former President Jacob Zuma. Another area, in my view, that we need to look at is that maybe there could have been a possibility for both Jacob Zuma and Julius Malema to cooperate outside the formal establishment of political party activities. Now that they drank tea together, that was before the formation of the MKP. And now that MKP is formed, they are not going to be restricted from recruiting from any political party. The EFF itself has been a beneficiary of people moving from one party to the other. And the same now is happening with MKP recruiting from other political parties, including the EFF. What we have learned in this exercise is that people, supporters and members of different political parties would always move from one party to the other. And what becomes the challenge to political leaders is their ability to keep their members, make their members happy, and ensure that they do not lose members to other political parties, because you unfortunately cannot recruit outside the borders of the Republic.
The MK party question you have yet to respond to. Let me crystallize it in this way. In studio the other day, I had businessman Ruel Khoza, who says, if you look at the MK party, it's populated by, quote unquote, fugitives from the law. How much support are they likely to garner from members of the public? You've heard Dalimpofu, he says, we're now going to solidify the party, we're going to grow it, we'll be talking a completely different party in 2 years' time.
Clearly, the biggest question we need to ask is as to whether the South African public cares about the fugitives or not. But also at the same time, it will depend on the strategy that the MK party has to build. There has always been a hype around new political parties. And what we have learned in South African politics is that most parties that are formed, and indeed formed towards the elections, they gain a lot of momentum, as when time moves, they actually lose such momentum. We've seen that with so many of them in South Africa, and we want to sit and see how the MKP is going to perform. It is also correct that some people will label those that are being recruited into the MKP as the fugitives of law. And it is also informed by the history surrounding these individuals. And indeed, it will therefore require a lot of PR exercise on the part of Floyd Shibambu himself and his communications team to ensure that they build the MK party's image and do their best not to portray most of the prominent members of the MK party as the fugitives from the law.
Dr. Levy Ndou, thank you very much for your time. He is attached to the university, the Tshwane University of Technology.